All right. It's 11:01. We do have some attendees. We have 4 attendees, so I'd like to welcome them. Given the time, we have a fairly light agenda today, but I will do what I do best, which is share my screen just to show everybody what the agenda is. Oh, thank you. And I hope I am sharing the right screen here. Are you all seeing the agenda?
We are.
Marvelous. So for today, we will do welcome and introductions. So welcome to our Finance Committee members and panelists, I think is what they're called in Zoom. And thank you and welcome to everybody who has joined us from the community. Our agenda is also going to cover some budget and funding updates. I'll share my screen for that. Implementation topics, we'll do a quick check-in around contracts, updates, any vendor support. This is the standing agenda that if you have been attending these meetings prior to today, are probably familiar with. And then I have an other topic if we have time to get to it, and I think we probably will. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and just start with introducing myself, and then I will call on people that I see on the screen to introduce themselves, and then we will get into the meat of the agenda. My name is Deb Poulin. I am the Clinical Director for the Office of Behavioral Health. I also am newly the Treasurer for the Maine Recovery Council and the Chair of the Finance Committee. So welcome to everyone. And Pat, I will move to you. Call as I see the squares on my screen.
Good morning. My name is Pat Kimball. I'm the current chair of the Maine Recovery Council. Welcome.
Thank you. Chastity?
Hi everyone, Chastity Toole. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the new executive director of the Maine Recovery Council.
Thank you. Holly?
Good morning. My name is Holly Stover. I am I'm a House representative for House District 48, including the towns of Boothbay, Boothbay Harbor, Southport, Edgecombe, Westport Island, and South Bristol, where it's absolutely gorgeous today. And I'm a legislative member of the council.
Thank you so much. Brendan?
Hi, Brendan O'Neill from the Attorney General's office.
Thank you. Grayson?
Hi, my name's Grayson. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm also with the Attorney General's office.
Thank you. And Elizabeth?
Hello, I am Elizabeth Forder. I apologize, my camera is not on. I cannot get my internet is being very weird today. So I'm just gonna, hopefully, if I keep my camera off, the internet will work a little bit better audio wise. But I am the coordinator for the Maine Recovery Council.
Thank you. Welcome. And you're just in time to do an introduction. Todd, please.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Todd Brackett. I'm the sheriff in Lincoln County.
Thank you very much. Okay, so in returning to the agenda, the next item is budget and funding update. So I am once again going to share my screen. And I'll talk about it when I share the screen, actually. Let me know if you're seeing an Excel sheet. You are. Okay. I took the liberty of taking a PDF version that's generated in the Office of the Attorney General for the Maine Recovery Council Fund, which is extremely helpful. We use it as a reconciliation sheet, but I took the liberty of reformatting a little bit so that I'm able to present to the Finance Committee and the community a little bit. It's not more detail, it's just a bit of a different presentation of the detail that is included in the PDF. So I did that for transparency and also just for formatting. I am going to continue to work on this Excel sheet to format it a little bit differently. I tossed it together. I only got the OAG report yesterday, so I didn't have time to do a lot of formatting on the Excel sheet. So I do apologize. It's pretty simplistic here, but I also wanted to make it a little bit readable. So let's go through. This is for the period ending June 30th, 2025, we have a current balance of $26,782,237.96. Prior to that, we had a beginning ledger balance of $32,567,080.23. We did incur or accrue revenue of $227,004.63. The revenue, for everyone's awareness, is interest generated on our account balance. And then expenses and payout was $6 million. Well, just over $6 million. It was a pretty big payout for us. There were a number of contracts that received payment, and I'll go through that. So our ending ledger balance is just under $27 million, just rounding up a little bit. Feel free to interrupt me at any time. And also, if anyone picks up on any mistakes that I made, because this is the first time I'm doing this meeting, feel free to jump in and correct me. I welcome that as well. So in terms of the expense detail, that's the part that I really wanted to share with you. When I say that contracts go out, there were payments. I think that it's important for the committee and our community participants to know where it went and where that money actually, where the tally was. So we had 2 payments that went out to Healthy Acadia, one to Aroostook County Action Program, one to Bangor Area Recovery Network, fondly known as the Barn. Gateway Community Services, Maine Health had 3 payouts, different projects. Michael's Active Recovery, Maine Pretrial, Milestone Recovery, Maine Transgender Network, Maine Works, Opiate Free Island Partnership, St. Andre's Homes, City of Somerset, United Recovery Fund, Maine Community Action, Mercy Hospital, Family Planning, Mid-Maine Homeless Shelter, Central Maine Community Health, Lifeline for Maine Recovery, Lewiston Auburn Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce, Tessa Lee Libby Treatment Center, and Needlepoint Sanctuary. Todd.
These payments have actually gone?
Yep.
The checks have been written?
That's my understanding. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's another reason why I wanted to present the information this way, is there was a lot of work that had to be done and a lot of organization on the part of the Maine Recovery Council to make sure that this money was getting out the door to the recipients of the awards. And this was a significant amount of money that got out to our communities, which is really exciting. When you look at this list, in preparation for becoming the chair of the Finance Committee, I did some homework and went backwards, and this is a significant payout. So it's really exciting to see that. So in terms of awardee payouts for the contracts above, that was almost $6 million, which is almost the total of the payout. There was a bit of staff expense at about $22,000. And then there's the stay cap of $28,300. So that's where we end up getting our total expenses here. And the point of presenting the information this way as well is just to let everyone know that a majority of the funds are going to the awardees and getting out to the projects that are so important for our community. So I will stop sharing for the moment and ask does the committee find this format helpful? And is this an acceptable way to present the information? Do you feel that you like that? And second, do you have any questions?
I think the format's great. I don't know if we can have it as an attachment to, because you didn't see because I pulled my screen up closer so I could actually see it.
You can jump in at any time and ask me to make it bigger. And yes, you can do that. And secondly, yes, it can be an attachment. In the future, it will be an attachment. I only got the OAG report yesterday afternoon. Sure. And so I put this spreadsheet together first thing this morning. So, but in the future, yes, absolutely. And ideally, we'd be able to get it out for anyone who is invited. So, Pat?
I love the format. Thank you very much for this format. I can tell you, Sheriff Brackett's been asking for this format for a long time. It's really clear as to what's going out, what's coming in. My one question in regards to that, I think you said we had a balance of 26 million or something on the bottom there.
Mhm.
Do we know how much is left to distribute from the round of grants from that 26 million?
I can figure that out. I'll need to go back to a different spreadsheet
Yeah.
that I can actually, I'll pull it up and show you.
Because I
This-
think that's helpful to know that, like, if you look at that, say, whoa, if we got 26 million, let's look at, what we're going to do with that. But there's also money that's been promised. So for me, it's how much of that 26 million has been promised.
Just writing myself a note so that I can follow up on that. Sheriff Brackett?
I agree. Great presentation. I mean, it's simple to read. It makes sense. My follow-up question, I think, is similar to Pat's. I think we're asking, maybe I'm just asking it a different way. I know that, we had a budget laid out somewhere, right? And it broke down some of those items that Pat's referring to. So to see some, eventually, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. You're probably all on this already, Deb, but at some point to be able to look at the budget, this year's budget versus, so like Pat said, we can see what's still pending, what's gone out, how much is being carried over into future years, those kind of things. And you said the interest, I missed part of the conversation earlier. The interest is just included in that total.
Yeah. So every month when an interest payment comes in, it gets added to the balance ledger that's existing. So when we have the reconciliation report that comes out of the OAG's office, it's got all of our expenses, but it also has the interest credit. Yep. So let me share. Oh, before we keep going, we have another member that's joined us. Maggie, do you want to just introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Maggie McLaughlin. I'm a council member representing a litigating subdivision. Sorry I was late. I was having IT challenges logging in. Didn't like my email. I got there eventually though. So sorry I missed the initial presentation, Deb. I caught the last screen and it looked amazing. So looking forward to getting the attachments.
Great, thank you. Brendan.
Thanks, Deb. Just a couple of sort of two minor points and one sort of larger point about the presentation. One is that the OAG reconciliation was through June 30th, as I
Yes.
understand it. We were expecting another opioid settlement payment on June 30th, but I haven't been able to confirm that we received it. So it's not clear to me that it's included or not in your reconciliation. And there's another another payment that or two payments that we're expecting really imminently, so they wouldn't be included on your 630 reconciliation. So I just want to talk about those totals. The 631 that we were expecting was in the amount of $1.4 million, just over. And the other two that are coming in that are, we're supposed to come in this week, and they're, as I say, we're imminently expecting them, was just under 1.6 million. So those incoming opioid settlement payments total $3,027,911.22. In other words, just over $3 million is coming in from the ongoing opioid settlement payments. And it's, presumably future reconciliations will make clear, when those hit the bank account and where they sit in the budget. The The other minor point I saw on the list, the city of Somerset, I suspect that's actually the county of Somerset.
That's what I think too. And I was going to ask that question because it said Somerset City of on
Yeah.
the list, and I didn't want to make an assumption, but
I don't
caught
know
that
Maine
too.
as well as I ought to, but just the internet tells me that there's only Somerset County.
Okay. I will change it on my spreadsheet. I don't know if it's necessary to change it on the OAG spreadsheet or if we just know that it's county instead of city.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And that, that I guess maybe it's a different committee that like in the future, I kind of want to raise the technical point about the settlements when the Recovery Council makes a payment to one of the subdivisions rather than to a project in a particular subdivision. But it kind of raises the question for me, and I'm not sure that this is the right committee for me to raise that technical issue. The larger point, but I'm happy to talk about it. The larger point I want to make is that 6 million and change of or 5 million in contracts that got out, that represents a huge amount of work by the Recovery Council team, and working in conjunction with the finance team and the OEG, and Grayson, and so Grayson, Elizabeth, Mary, now Chastity's taking up the wheel on that, plus the OAG finance team. So I just want to acknowledge that the last several months have been a huge amount of work to get those payments out.
Thank you. I can verify that the 1.4 million is not reflected. It was not on the reconciliation sheet, so it probably didn't make it. I would anticipate then that it will appear on the July reconciliation sheet. If it doesn't, I'll follow up before the finance committee meeting to find out what happened there. In terms of, I'm a big screen sharer, so I'm going to do this again. In terms of being able to figure out and calculate what still needs to go out in preparation for this meeting. This is a working spreadsheet that I would love to take credit for, but it is not me. It is Grayson and Mary who had this sheet, which shows all of the approved entities for payout, their contract numbers, start dates, end dates, first payment, second payment, and then their total allocation. So what I can do is go back through some of the sheets. It will take a little bit of looking back and some math to figure out what's been paid out and what hasn't yet been paid out. But I can use this really helpful spreadsheet to compare reconciliation to what's anticipated and be able to get that information to you, if that sounds reasonable. Okay, great. Now I will go back to the agenda. And the next agenda topic is any contract updates. I do not have any contract updates. I don't know if any other member on the committee has any contract updates to share. Going once, going twice. I will say that the Recovery Council in general is already having conversations, if you haven't been able to meet or join our larger system meeting, but already starting to gear up and think about what the next round of opportunities is going to look like. So we are already in our preparatory phase, but it's at a high level at this point. We don't have any level or detail to share, but it is well on our radar and part of our conversations. And vendor support. This is a standing agenda item that came from my predecessor. And I believe that to mean, are we aware of any vendors that need any help, any TA or otherwise, technical assistance or otherwise? But if I am misinterpreting that agenda item, I would welcome being educated.
Deb, I think that refers to the RFP that we sent out in regards
Ah.
to contract support. And if the actual council needed assistance in that, and I should have been clearer with that with you. But I believe that's an update on the RFP that we sent out for contract support.
Thank you. I read that in an entirely different way. So thank you.
Well, it wasn't real clear, so but I believe unless somebody else has a different view, but I believe that was the support, the vendor support for us. That was Barry Dunn, and a report back on where Barry Dunn was with that, and also now that the RFP is out, where are we in the process of that? And I don't know if Elizabeth has anything to report on the RFP.
Yeah, we still haven't gotten any responses to that in terms of submissions. We did get one question, clarifying question on that, so I don't know. We may have a discussion maybe next week. Oh, Grayson, just some positive news from Grayson. We did get a submission this morning, so that's very exciting. And I don't know if Chastity, Grayson, and I may have a discussion next week about further outreach on that, just because that deadline is the 31st. And as you know, we want to make this a competitive process and make sure we can, and that means having multiple submissions. And so we'll likely have a discussion about what we can do to further that outreach and get that in front of more people, just so we can make that again, a competitive process and make sure we have get some good applications. But
Thank you for the update. And Maggie, you had your hand up?
You already answered it, Elizabeth. I was wondering about how we can, with the deadline, and if we could advertise in more spaces.
All right. That is a little bit disappointing to hear for an update, but we will continue to plug along. Does anybody else have an other agenda item before I launch into my own?
My only thought was, and I don't know which committee it will belong to, but I had a short conversation when the meeting started with Representative Stover, whether it's us or program and grants to really look at a time frame for the next round of funding. I know that program and grants is working on the policy in regards to making requests on non-grant times, but we really need, and again, I don't know whether it's finance or program and grants, but we really do need an outline of a time frame of when the next round will start and start gearing up for that. Because I'll tell you, they were 2-year funding and we're already in year 1. And so by year 2, you want to have your grants out. So, there'll be no disruption in the flow.
And I had an email from a provider / constituent asking me, and I was like, I'll ask. I don't know.
Yep.
So,
and then you're going to get more asks in this current climate. You're going to get more. And so that's why we really need to bump up with programs and grants that policy on non-grant time requests and how we do that.
That actually is aligned with my topic. So that's good and that's timely. Before we go to that, Maggie.
Yeah, same thing. I think even like maybe even outside of non-grant windows, just because the impact of the federal budget adjustments are going to be so huge on particularly some of our smaller partners who depend on these revenue streams that are going to be disappearing. I'm wondering if we need to be more responsive and build out a grant application that's just specifically around, because we have those rules around supplanting versus supplementing, but in the absence of things that were there, and I think that allows us to support. And so I think we may need to at least think through the process. I think it's going to take a couple months. And some of these federal changes will flow down in 2027, some will flow down this fall, et cetera. But if we can start thinking through that process of so that maybe we don't have to track some as emergency. I think we still need an emergency process, but my assumption is that also lives best with grants, programming grants. And so if maybe we can, I think we pause those meetings for a minute and get those restarted on a frequency so we can be responsive.
And I don't think if, let's just say a provider lost their federal funding, it would be fine with supplementation to bring in these other funds because they've lost. If it was general fund that was taken out to put in another purpose, that wouldn't pass the straight face test around supplementation. But this, the loss of federal funds, absolutely would. Just my opinion.
Yeah, thank you for raising that. It's important, and it's linked to a conversation that I'd like to have with the Finance Committee and also potentially with the larger Maine Recovery Council. We can decide that here. Let me again share my screen. Please don't ask me for any detail at all in the spreadsheet because I did not create it, but I am very grateful it was created by my predecessor. This is a conversation that Ben, my predecessor, started, and I spent some time in preparation for this committee meeting and just becoming the treasurer and looking at this. Let me walk you through this a little bit, but really get to my narrative point. What Ben had done is he did estimated, and I will underscore and emphasize estimated payments that will come into us over the course of, he went to 17 years. And then I'm going back, not to make you dizzy, and then the cumulative totals. However, even though the totals look very robust, if you go down into the blue area, we also have to consider our ongoing payments versus our one-time payments. And what is of concern on this spreadsheet is that you see in year 7, which is not that far away, when you think about things, you start to see red and you start to see that we're running a deficit. And even though money is coming in, this is projecting out, and it's a bit of a forecast, but it's projecting out that if we continue paying out at the rate we're paying out, we potentially will run out of money and then cumulatively run out of money. And again, this is all estimates, so I don't want to be gloom and doom here. We have an opportunity to plan. What I would like to say, just in thinking about this, and I don't want to study this, I'm using this to make a point in terms of the conversation. I don't know, because I'm fairly new to the council, I don't know if conversations were had when you started to think about awarding the settlement funds as to whether or not the awards would be ongoing beyond the 2 years. So from a state perspective, what we will do with our contracts is, from the department, is we will sometimes continue through contract extensions, through amendments or otherwise, and programs will come to rely on the funding, knowing that it's going to be ongoing over time. There are also dollars that go out from the state that are known to be one-time funding. And this is a catalyst fund that we're giving you to get off the ground, and then you need to be sustainable moving forward. And usually within the RFP process, there's a heavy focus on sustainability, knowing that it's one-time funding and that we're just not going to have it again. And that usually comes from how the legislature appropriates funds. Sometimes they appropriate it ongoing, sometimes it's one time, and then it becomes our job to manage that. So, and I'm about to stop talking because I want feedback, but in terms of thinking about the future, I think we need to contemplate what we have funded and whether or not that's going to be ongoing, and we're going to need to do some financial projection around what that's going to cost. And then as we gear up for our next round, really think about and be very clear with our our awardees or our applicants actually, what will be one time sort of catalyst or capital funding and what could be anticipated as longer term. We're going to have to get our arms around this, and I suggest getting our arms around this sooner rather than later so that we don't get into the deficit situation. That's my speech. I welcome feedback. Pat?
So you're absolutely right. And if I'm not mistaken, we were a little murky with it. I don't believe in any of the contracts. It states it's ongoing. I believe the contracts had a start date and an ending date. I don't think there was anyone that was given in those contracts. Again, it may have been implied, but it was never in those contracts that the money would be ongoing. And I think, Deb, you're right. I think it's a longer conversation for the council to look at, to say, are some of the programs we're supporting going to be an ongoing sort of piece? And if it is, what do we need to do to ensure that what they're going to do with the funds is still within the MOU and within the settlement, as well as, but I think it's a longer conversation. But again, we need to have it because, as you pointed out, we have to start putting a little money aside so that we can not have years where we're in the red. We can't do that. We can't have a deficit. We're a balanced budget group. And so we do need to have, figure out how much we need to set aside each year so that that doesn't happen, as well as that conversation. Are these ongoing programs we're going to support, or is this funding going to be RFP'd every single time?
Yeah, thank you, Pat, for that. That's actually what I was thinking too. And as I contemplated the spreadsheet that I gave you a little bit more than a glimpse of, but put it up on the screen, is we don't have any place to borrow from. We can't, to be cliche, we can't rob Peter to pay Paul here because we just don't, this is what we have. And so if we run a deficit, that's going to put our awardees in jeopardy, quite frankly. So we need to plan for that. I think we can plan for that. I would encourage us to be very clear. And then secondarily, we just talked about the RFP, but we don't really have contract managers right now. And to me, some of the homework would be reaching out to our awardees to find out what is their perception. Did they recognize that this is one-time funding? Were they assuming that they were going to have ongoing funding? We need to have some conversations, and I don't know, understanding that we don't really have a lot of staff who would do that. Would it be Chastity? Would it be Barry Dunn? Would it be divided amongst us? Yeah, I don't know, and that's probably the larger council discussion. Maggie.
I think you bring up a ton really great points across the board, and we should factor that into when we're thinking about offsetting losses to keep doors open. How long can we do that? Is that 4 years? Is that 3 years, etc.? And adding to the homework, I think we've had this question up in the air of how much do we outsource of the responsibility of the operations and management of the grants and the contracts versus not. And the RFP is meant to be kind of a temporary solution. And Chastity, so glad you're here now, because that was also a key step, is getting the executive director in place to make a decision about that. So I know it's still early days, Chastity, but I think this will also be an important factor to think through, even if it's a couple scenarios, like what does the financing look like if we continue to outsource that? And what does the financing look like if we choose to bring that in-house for costs? So that way we can factor that into how much is in that pipeline over the long term, and assuming that that takes a couple years of transition to make happen. But adding that in as a dynamic.
Thank you. And I appreciate the point about how long can we offset losses, because losses are losses. And so that would have been sustainable funding. And what is our role in that? Yeah, I feel like we have one. I just don't know. I don't know what exactly the extent of what that is. Chastity?
Yeah, into everything you guys are talking about, I just wanted to highlight some of those asks are already there. Like the SSPs, they're going to be in year 2 in no time. So we're going to have to look at that everyone met their deliverables to get year 2, that part. There's been new SSPs that have come on since then. So the CDC has asked, do we have funds set aside for that, which the council never talked about. And then some of our early funding decisions are already asking what's happening when this is up. Like, are we going to be able to get it again? Because we know we're not getting state money for this. So I think this is all sooner rather than later to figure out.
I'll raise my hand.
Chair Brackett?
Yeah, we've had a fair amount of conversation around the budget and the original budget that Ben put together, and kind of spread that out over the 17 years. Of course, understanding that that's variable, and there was a fair amount of money that was loaded up front in the beginning of the process. But I don't remember any conversation about, or I remember a significant amount of conversation, I think, about cautioning the council to bind a future council, years into the future as far as funding goes. And I think that's why at least in part, why we came up with a 2-year plan. I know in the prevention area, there's been some discussion. I don't think there's been any decision that I know of about whether those funding opportunities should be a little more extended. And there may be some necessity for that. I don't know, but I do think I do think we should spend some time, not necessarily today, as a group, and try to talk this through a little bit more, so we can bring something back to the council at some point about how do we keep it out of the red, and how do we and how do we maintain the budget we established, or modify the budget that we've established, so we can stay in the red. And then I guess I'm probably just repeating what's been said before, but those are some of the conversations I remember about what the budget would look like over time.
Thank you. Brendan? Oh, sorry.
Representative Stover's hand was up first.
My
Okay.
real hand.
Yep, go for it.
I just wanted to respond to what's been said. There's a lot of things that we know and things that we don't about the federal cuts. Some of them happen in 26, and some of them happen 27, and some of them happen in 28. And we know that they're devastating. We know that. I'm on I'm part of a 3-year SAMHSA grant. We're in year 1 of our funding on veteran suicide to create a veteran suicide mortality review committee, and we got partway through year 1. We didn't quite make it to the finish year, only year 1, and we're informed recently that years 2 and 3 under SAMHSA is gone. The funding is completely gone. And so these things, and I sit on appropriations, so it's sort of top of mind all the time about what is it going to look like? What is this new world going to look like? Whether it's those individual grants that come from various state departments to our providers, particularly in behavioral health and some other areas, certainly in domestic violence and sexual assault, who have relied heavy on federal grants. But we know that federal grants, whether they're individual grants to agencies or they're block grants to the state, and or the changes in Maine Care, federal Medicaid, what is that going to look like? And how does this council, with again, finite resources. Wouldn't it be nice to have infinite resources? But plan for, we just had a fabulous conference where we celebrated all the successes, of which there are many. And it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying to think as you begin to build something up, which is really feels where we're at, these things almost like overshadowing are going to come down on us. And so having a better sense of what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, if we know, and then there's always these unknowns, which are like grenades that seem to be lobbed over the wall, and providers were not prepared and they get the notice. So all of that's happening around us while we try to figure out the budget and financing for the council, and how critical, probably more critical going forward right now than it was even at the beginning when we had other state funds, and we had more predictable, solid federal funds. And we see that all of that is under siege. And I'm not looking for answers. I'm just stating what really is like right on the top of my mind as we go forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Brendan had his hand up and then Maggie.
Just a couple of points. One is it occurs to me that so two options have been talked about using any available funds. One is doing another application process. Another is extending the existing contracts as upon review and as needed and as appropriate. And then a third could be, I think this is possible. I'm not sure there's any restrictions that would prevent the council from doing this, but a third could be going back and looking at unfunded applications from the prior RFP. You already have a stable of applications that were not funded because the council, essentially had a budget and it ran out of money to fund existing applications. There's a contrary argument, which is, well, the world has now changed, as Representative Stover has articulated, and so maybe the needs are different, which might dictate doing a new process. But I just wanted to, you've already got that, those applications in house, and I believe I'm not sure that there's any restrictions on the council just revisiting the unfunded applications. Two other sort of technical points about the background of the council. One is on the supplement, not supplant. I agree with the point that really refers to the recipient of the grant money. The entity that's getting the money can't shift money around itself. If other money is being taken away from somewhere else, I don't think that would be a supplanting by the recipient, but it could be kind of a case or fact specific thing, and we can look at that if there's ever a question about it. The other point to make is just to point out both the restrictions on the use of these funds and on the mandate of the council in light of the increased demand and the cuts that are coming down, from the federal government. The point of the funds is to put them to the most effective use possible to address the opioid crisis. And the council is going to get a ton of demands, an increasing number of demands, and I think it's worth it to remind for the council to remind itself of the point of using the funds in the most effective way to end the opioid crisis, depending on what the needs are in the communities.
Thank you. I think that that's a really poignant point around the restrictions of the use and staying grounded, and remind ourselves of that. And also probably something we need to talk about with the larger council, because I think that resonates quite a bit. Maggie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just thinking about where this conversation lives, and I think I agree. Like what we use and how we react, I think might live better at a general council or with programs and grants to start and then up. But maybe what this committee can do to help that conversation, and I say this committee, and I know it might mean you, Deb, or it might mean you, Chastity, but we're all here to help if you want help. Um, but I'm wondering, like, can we provide some analysis to help guide that from the financial side? So if we were to distribute 2 million for 1 year, 2 million for 4 years, five, like just scenarios A, B, and C, that can help then make decisions around the scope of what we can offer partners. So that way we know, like, if we're going to commit for 3-year grants, we're going to run out of money 4 years earlier. If we're just going to commit to one-off funding, we're going to run out of money here, and then just they might choose a different scenario, but if we can give them a couple options to look at, then it might help guide that conversation in terms of the trade-off.
Yes. The answer is yes. Thank you, Sheriff Brackett. We can do that. I'm not sure how quickly I'll get that done, but in somewhat of an expedited manner, I'll get that done. Hopefully for the next meeting, but if not, the following. I think that definitely makes a lot of sense. I still think, very much like Ben's spreadsheet, it's an estimate. Yeah, it's an estimate, but it will certainly put some context around it and maybe help guide decision making. And that seems appropriate for this committee.
Yeah, I think that's where, again, it's this committee that should say, you only have so much money, and this is what it is. In order to continue funding for the next 18 years, this is how it works out. And then have those other conversations about one-time deals, 2-year deals, ongoing, commitments. Those are long conversations, but the actual dollars as to how much we have. And again, particularly when Ben made those sheets, it's really important. We cannot go into a deficit. We can't. And so how do we plan for that financially? Not even where does the money go, but how this is the reality of the money and how we spread it out so it lasts 20 years.
Yeah. We have 10 minutes left. I just want to, in the context of the conversation we're having, I just want to go back to, and maybe this really is a matter of just bringing this spreadsheet to the larger council. If you look in the blue and you look at line 7, council approved budget. So this doesn't include the interest payments. And I had showed you early on, I think this month it was 227,000 that came in. I know last month it was around 123,000. So this will up a little bit, but based on Ben's spreadsheet, you've got your annual budget as the council approved. So for year 3, 15 million is what you approved to use. 10 of the 15 million would be for ongoing funding. 5 would be for one-time shorter one-time funding, with your running total, which would give you the available balance of 21 based on year 3 estimate. Year 4, it breaks down very similar. I'm just kind of walking through so you can understand how to read it. Year 4, it's the same. Year 5, same methodology. But by year 7, that's when you start to see the deficit. And you also start to see that the ongoing funding, even at the reduced, and I'll slide this over a little bit, even at the reduced amount, because we're going to start reducing our incoming amount, well, it will start to reduce. Even with the reduced, you start to get into the deficit. So potentially part of this is re-looking at what the annual budget, re-looking at what we've decided should be ongoing. And it almost feels like, and again, this goes back to, so in some ways the analysis has been done in some ways, but it almost goes back to the council, now that we have a little bit of experience under us, starting to look at whether or not our ongoing funding is too high, and that maybe the one time, maybe we need to shift that a little bit to make the larger amounts one time and the ongoing smaller, or less. And then that gets back to what Brendan said. We can open up for new applications. We can extend existing projects if it wasn't clear that it was one-time funding. We can look at unfunded applications. But I think some of the first work is readjusting what the council agreed on for a budget and ongoing. But I didn't want to linger in terms of having the conversation, Brendan.
Thanks. And before we run out of time, and I will have to leave just before 12, I want to echo what the Attorney General said at the Governor's Summit, which is he talked about a couple of new settlements that are in the process of being signed on to, so they're not final. It's sort of two groups of settlements. One is the kind of Purdue Sackler settlement, which is itself a couple of settlements, and it's very, very complicated. Then there's another group of settlements that were announced in a number, nationwide, of sort of 8 smaller opioid manufacturers that are coming together as a group. Those two sets of settlements are, we estimate, and all of this is subject to change, could bring in another $30 million over 10 years. If they come to conclusion, they won't start coming into Maine until the earliest next calendar year. And I couldn't even begin to predict which fiscal year. But the $30 million, as with all of the opioid settlements, that's a maximum estimated number. And the maximum always depends on getting 100% sign on by the 39 subdivisions that get their own chunk of change. And notice is going to start going out soon to the subdivisions from a settlement administrator, not from my office. But the point is, Maine gets the most, it gets everything it's entitled to get if we get 100% sign on. So far, we've been able to achieve that in Maine. But I'm hopeful that we can again. But the subdivisions may benefit from knowing that, people in their community think this is important. But more information will be coming out soon, but I just want to, before the council counts its chickens before they roost, there's some additional money coming in. It could be in the range of like $1 million a year additional for the council. But again, this is kind of funny numbers. So I don't want to I just want to, point out that there's something additional coming in, but I wouldn't count too heavily on, it's not going to change the nature of the conversation.
That is so much more positive, though, than where I was just a couple of minutes ago. So thank you for that. And even that alone, as I'm looking at the projected deficit, would almost completely cover, if not more. So maybe we don't need to adjust the budget just yet until we find this out. But I still think we need to have the conversation.
In the other conversation, Deb, and I couldn't see the fine print of of that budget, is the chunk that has to be taken out for education.
That is because it is on.
I think it's on another part of that page.
It's on a separate
Okay,
tab.
so it's not included in that budget because we can't spend that money that belongs to the education piece.
Correct. Do you want to see the set aside?
No. I just want to make sure that it's there. But
it is there. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
It is definitely there. Ben set this up so beautifully. Thank you, Ben, in your honor. So yes, that is there. I don't know, Pat, Brendan, Chastity, when to start this conversation with the larger council. I don't know if you want it as an agenda item just to get the conversation, put it on the table for people to start thinking about I can throw some slides together if you think that's appropriate for the next meeting. If not, maybe within the next couple of meetings.
I think it's appropriate to start that conversation next month. I don't know how Chastity feels, but I think it's appropriate. Again, and I do really like the way you put that budget out there. People have been looking, they've seen somewhat of Ben's charts before, but yours really answers that piece of, has the money been going out? Who's getting the money? How is that working? And so I think that that is a great, but I think we need to start having the futuristic conversation about where we are and what we can spend and what we can't spend.
Okay, that sounds good. Any other items for today's meeting? I'm open to any feedback, anything you'd like to see different. All right, thank you all for attending. Thank you for
Nice
those
job,
that
Deb.
listened in on us. Always happy to have you.
Nice job, Deb.
All right, thank
Everybody
you.
have a good weekend.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
And for your first one, Deb, you did great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.